So it's really tiny on here, so I'm going to back up. One of the things was kind of just backing up a little bit and talking about the essentials. So artificial intelligence, it's a field that aims to create systems capable of performing tasks. But those tasks typically require human intelligence in order to perform them. So if it can perform a task that, typically has some level of that. What I'm seeing is that some people are calling now traditional AI, classic AI, and then Gen AI. And so typically with a traditional AI system, sometimes when I tell people it can be deterministic, they're like, well, wait a second, I don't understand. It's AI. So typically what you do though is as you build a model, you do certain things to that model to, if you pass the same exact data through it, it's going to give you the same results. So that's really what the deterministic part is. It might only have an accuracy of 90%, 70%, 50%. But with Gen AI, there's definitely the probabilistic, that was hard to say this morning, nature, and uses it really starts kind of looking at patterns and developing things for you. One thing that I've seen quite a bit is that people think it's really going to play a part, or it's already playing a part in augmenting data and creating data for you so that you can actually use that to build some of your models. I think oftentimes if you are going to include it in a system, then you probably might have also some sort of nature where you may have AI and Gen AI combined. So here's your eye chart today. But this tells you how many subfields there are. And just like the presentation before, you see that generative AI is one of many. And so, within Southern Company, we engaged a vendor, went around, talked to a lot of, different executives across the entire footprint. And so I saw kind of a list of some of the use cases and stuff that were coming out of that. And so even though they were all identified here, they were really all over the place. So this one is really just showing you a little bit more about where generative AI fits. So you have, with machine learning, you have all these different model types and so forth, but within your generative models, and you see these are just some examples of some that are in the marketplace, but there are a lot of different ways that you can interact with them through prompting, training a new data set, fine-tuning, and it's all based on that transformer-based architecture that was mentioned in the earlier conversation. So this is really just meant to show you how things have changed over time. There's more compute available. So when ChatGPT first, I guess version 3.5 first reared its head, there was so much hype around it. And a lot of people, and I'm sure you guys talk to vendors all the time that come in and they say, hey, we're building our own large language model. I think probably in the end, it's, to build a large language model, it's millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. But, what I thought was interesting is whenever you, Sasha, were talking about data centers earlier, we used to have people come to us and say, oh, I'm going to need this much electricity. Now they're coming and saying, we'll take your entire nuclear plant. And it's like, well, wait a second, that's not possible. And so you got to figure out somewhere in the middle there, right? But so this will show you kind of compute. Obviously what has made the difference is that we have so much data, and there's, the math has been there for years, for a long, long, long time. But what you can see is that, and these, none of these are real people. None of these are real images. These are all generated. But the progression over time is that initially you could see maybe some features, maybe in more prominent features, but now it's actually starting to get very, very good at being able to kind of, replicate some of these things around the edges and stuff. So to me, this is a really good depiction of, of what's transpired. So before I go to that one, I always like to play a little game, just I have to put my eyes on. So who's ever played Two Truths and a Lie? Okay, so basically I'm going to read 3 statements. One's not going to be truth. So I'm going to ask show of hands. So first one, and this is all about AI. Okay, first one. AI can call you in a presidential candidate's voice and personally ask you to vote for them. Number 2, ChatGPT knows what a Scooby snack is, like Scooby-Doo. Number 3, AI can multitask and make moral judgments just like you and me. All right, so was number 1 incorrect? No? All right, what about number 2? Okay, number 3, we agree with that one? That's right, I can't fool you guys. Let's try one more. Okay, first one, AI results are fully explainable. Second, AI regulations for usage have been set across the globe. Third, someone recently tricked an AI chatbot to sell them a car for $1. Okay, who thinks number 1 is the lie? Okay. Who thinks number 2 is the lie? Okay. Who thinks number 3 is the lie? Okay. So a lot of people said number 2. There are regulations that are going in across the globe. Even if you look within the US, California has a lot, Colorado has a lot, and they have very specific things about what you can and can't do in healthcare. Those are some of the things that you're seeing. Of course, we see the EU, and things like that, a lot of regulations that are coming in place. If you read through some of the EU regulations, it says that your model for specific, if I can say that word, things is that it needs to be explainable. All your results are not explainable within, so it was number 1, within an AI model. And that is one of the things, so as I've been I'm wrapping up my classes now and moving into my research phase, and so one of the things that you see a huge number of the doctoral candidates working on is how to make stuff explainable. Because at the end of the day, you can say, okay, here's this model, but you can't really explain how it's arriving at what it's doing. And there's a lot of things, there's like, some local explainability and global explainability, all kinds of models. If you're interested in it, I'd love to chat with you, like LIME and SHAP and ELI5. And okay, I'm going to stop nerding out and talk about this. How to choose between AI and Gen AI. A lot of things out on the internet about this. Some of the key ones that I pulled out. Define your objective. if your objective involves tasks like analyzing data and predicting an outcome, then traditional AI is best. If you're looking to create content and perhaps some innovation, a lot of times Gen AI is. Consider your data availability and your type. You really need to have, and I can't stress this enough, large, well-documented data for good AI. Evaluate your technical expertise and resources. Who's hired a data scientist recently? Yeah, there you go. She just pointed to them. So I'm going to say this, they're expensive. And if you read about the different skill sets and stuff, they're so popular that not okay. Now I'm trying to be PC, but they don't stay around long. Well, I'll just throw it out there. It might be that their typical tenure somewhere is like 2 to 3 years. And so there's a lot of conversation around having, looking inside of your company and, what type of skills can you glean from within your company? Can you develop some citizen data scientists? Can you, look to people that are currently doing your analytics and upskill them? But overall, you've got to have a data literate culture within your organization. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Analyze the cost and the ROI. One of the things, and I'll go ahead and say it, I have it somewhere in here, but don't be afraid to fail forward fast. That's one of the key items that we have in our AI strategy, is fail forward fast. That is probably something a little bit different in our industry. But be able to look at something and say, okay, this isn't going to work, or pivot and say, okay, I'm not going to be able to do predictive maintenance for this, specific piece of equipment because we don't ever let it fail, which is a good thing, right? But maybe I can look at something that is going to give me kind of a health score on it, and I can maybe apply a red light, type of technology, red, green, yellow. So industry trends and competitor analysis. Stay up to date. See kind of what some of the other people are doing. I know and even within some of the utility spaces, there are a lot of like the Analytics Institute and things like that. And then compliance and ethical considerations. So one of the things you have to consider is we were talking about some of these models that were developed from things from the internet. So if you want to be, if you want to, kind of expose some of the inherent bias, you might be able to go to DALL-E. Who's used DALL-E? So it's, a place where you can go in and generate images. And if you ask it to do an image of a pilot, what do you think it's going to show me? It's not going to show you someone who might be from varied ethnical backgrounds. It's going to show you someone who is not. And typically, it's not going to show you a female. It's going to show you a very, basically because that shows you the level of bias. And so for your use case, you have to really think about the types of biases that may be in it, and either offset those or accept them. But do know that, as we were talking about the person who tricked a chatbot into giving them, that was true. You can go find an article about that. Someone went in, played around with the chatbot, got the chatbot to say, yeah, I'll give you this car for $1. It was upheld in the court of law. So as you're thinking about some of the things that you're doing with your customers and some of the things that you're having, interface with them, probably want some checks and balances in there. Some of the things that I'm seeing with Gen AI is, if you have something that is that dire of a, like an external application or whatever, that is answering questions for people, and you're doing it live, you probably want to be recording what they're asking, what you're responding to them, and then have some type of algorithm that's applied to that to see if it's using words that you don't like, or if it's using, if the answers are completely different, which they call, who knows what they call that? It's said to be, see, you caught me. I thought somebody would answer that, and I don't remember. It starts with an H. Thank you. I lost the word. I'm like, it's hyperventilating? No, that's what was in my head. So hallucinating, thank you. So the model hallucinates, that's what they call it. Okay, so this, I think you'll probably have copies of the slide. But so some of the things that you really want to compare are, we've talked about some of this, the primary objective, the applications, some of the applications. One that I'm starting to see a lot is synthetic data generation. A lot of predictive and image analytics are on that traditional side. The technological approach, so you have a lot of structure and logic versus generation, creativity. So you're seeing this in who's used Copilot within Microsoft. Yeah. I like it. I do let it summarize my meetings and things like that. I got the most used out of ChatGPT, which, by the way, I'll dive into that just right now for just a few minutes. So you've probably seen a lot of things like when people go out and they're working through ChatGPT, especially initially whenever it first came out, you probably saw that a lot of companies are saying you can't use it with their own data. So there are ways that you can go into different cloud providers and set it up such that it's secure for your organization, that they're not going to use it to train data upon and all that good jazz. So I think there is there's definitely a movement toward, people kind of standing up their own. So we have one internally called AI Assist that we can utilize. And what's very, very interesting about it is that whenever you go in, you do play around with prompts. So it's always, if you are using it, get some people on your teams up to speed. There's lots of prompt engineering classes and certificates. There's some that are even free. And I have somebody on my team that got one and has been doing some training of different people, training them on how to be very, very good at prompting. But it's really more for productivity. So I used it to help write my performance reviews. God, I fell in love. I really did. I fell in love. So you write up like, hey, you still write up, hey, this person did this, this, and this. And then you say, give me a performance review of a, gold star, you just call it whatever you guys call it. And then of a person with these, named Kim with these characteristics. Boom. You have to read it. I mean, you're going to have to edit a few things, but it was pretty good. So anyway, moving right along. Okay, you see what's at the center of all of this other than my little robotic hand? Governance. Not everybody likes to talk about governance, but what I like to tell people is who knows what stopped, I'm going to say stopped, but who knows when the kind of era of the cowboy disappeared? Do you know why? Barbed wire. Creation, the invention of barbed wire, according to the internet. But you think about that. You think about that. You think about who's heard things like, oh, wow, they're in the Wild West or whatever. You've got to have some understanding of what you're asking, of what your company can tolerate as far as, bias, as far as, how models are developed. You've got to, so I have like all these things in here. There's my fell forward fast. So I'll just call out a couple because I'm, running a little bit low on time. But create a center of excellence. Have a few people who really, really are dedicated to the space. Data quality. If you don't have data quality, if you have bad data, you're going to have bad models. Focus on data literacy. Read about that. I went to a conference many years ago now, probably 5, 6, and the lady got up there and she said, who speaks, how many languages do you speak? And so as part of her talk, it was, she speaks data. I'm like, well, that's pretty freaking cool. Build or acquire talent. We talked about that. Fell forward. Okay, here's some of the things that I really wanted to put in there. Data pipelines, make big data easy to get. Research data ops, ML ops, and LLM ops. That will help you. But it really talks about best practices. And some of these things are things that if you start reading through it, you're like, okay, we do this, this, and this. But of these 10 things, maybe these are the 3 that we don't do. Version. Version your models, version your code. It's kind of goes back to having those model cards and things like that. Understand the systemic life cycle. One thing that I will tell you guys that I've seen time and time again. Yes.
Question on version. Are you seeing any requirements, any regulations coming into this? Any regulations applying to your model? And basically explainability of it and tracking,
So at present, I don't think, so I live in Georgia. We don't have any specific regulation. If I recall, there is one that applies to healthcare, but being outside of healthcare, it doesn't. I happened to be speaking with a gentleman recently who was able to go before the local Georgia Congress. So I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of this at locally rather than federally. I mean, you might federally at one point if they can ever, agree on anything. But so he actually went before them and answered questions and stuff for them. And what was really cool about that is he said, I think what you're going to see something soon around explainability. I will say that there was an area of the company that, that I've been talking to recently, had a vendor do something for them. I think it would make sense, like if you are doing a lot of things with outside consultants, is have a good contract in place. Understand if you're going to own that code at the end of the day, some don't give it to you. And if it's not, if you want that, then you need to make it very explicit. I had somebody that actually had a deliverable. What they delivered was a PDF. Here are your results. That's what you paid for. So I mean, so think about that. Make sure you are including supply chain and that you have a good template for those types of things. And then also, if you just because you put something out, so if you have like in typical software engineering, you might be doing 2 + 2 = 4. That's very easy, but it gets the idea. So if you within an AI process, if you start having your data shift, think about like one of the things that we saw a lot of. There was a huge data shift with COVID, right? Think about how the supply chain went upside down for the whole world. But the models, there was no predictability in them for any of those events because there was a data shift. You have all different types of shifts, but read about how those things can change. So you've got to monitor how your models are working. So I have a lot of things in here about center of excellence, but some of the things that you can do. We've talked about a lot of these, and a lot of these are common sense, but with some of the services that you can have. But I wanted to get to this slide just to kind of close out. So within utilities, these are a lot of this isn't an exhaustive list, but these are a lot of the types of use cases that you're seeing. It might be some of the use cases that you guys have actually created. So predictive maintenance, I'll go down, gap and trend analysis, fraud detection, customer sentiment analysis, and the list goes on and on. But some of the things that you're going to see here. So you might have a generative AI assistant. I specifically tried to put generative AI in those that are, whereas the others are going to be a little bit different. So that is just an example of some of the different use cases that you might see. I think going into my last slide, and I didn't quote this from anybody. I made this up. But I really think this is, if you think about it, actually the last gentleman said something very similar, that it's going to continue to move forward at a rapid pace. Having it as a tool, understanding the value is going to offer you to keep pace with innovation. And I think that if you're not looking at it, if you're not entrenched or at least kind of skimming at this point, then get started. One of the things that and these can be shared with you guys, but I also never mind. That's the next time, break time. But I had in the appendix for the one that you'll probably get a copy of, something like it was just a typical consulting that you might do, like some questions and stuff that you could answer, and things like that. I had that just for appendix consumption. So I'm standing between you guys and the break. Any questions? Anything you want to talk about?
And a lot of our discussions have not started with the productivity. It started with the sensitivity of the data out into an AI platform. And we discuss if some of the information that we put out there is sensitive enough to be a detriment to our company, or also is it discoverable in the court of law if we make decisions based on it. We're very curious if you had an opinion on that.
An excellent question. That one is, that one would be if you have a, for all of the pieces that you're talking about, and until you got to the court of law, I'm going, oh my gosh, no, that's really a good one. But I will tell you that at some point, that is I'm not aware of like any specific cases that has happened in. It will happen. And so I think that, and even though there aren't like regulations and stuff like that, it's probably, if there are regulations, I would be concerned. But if you have a good lawyer set of lawyers, I would think that they would say, this is private, we can't share it with you, kind of like, your, is your personal information. I will say that we are using, how you have to kind of go before different commissions and do different testimonies and stuff, especially if you're looking to for like a rate case or something like that. We do these prep cards for the people who are doing them. And we've started pulling some information together using, some more advanced statistical models and stuff in order to be able to create those. So there's been some conversation about utilizing Gen AI and stuff like that to pull some of that together. But it goes back to making sure that you're pulling the right information. Now with sensitivity, there's a lot of conversation over, we have, I don't know if you work with any colleges and stuff in your area, but we have a couple of colleges that we work with, and we have NDAs and stuff like that, but we have to anonymize those. We do have to anonymize it in order for there to be some level of training done on it. So if we anonymize the data, so if you are going to do something like that, make sure you have some anonymization techniques. And so, you don't want people using, people's addresses and their, some sort of personal information in order to do that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting out there
Mm-hmm.
which of your assets are at end of life and which one of their, I feel like there's some vulnerabilities that get put into this AI sometime that if it's out there, who's looking at it?
Well, for our asset health, I don't think we're necessarily exposing that externally. So you've got to think about what you expose internally versus externally. And if you are doing it externally, then you are going to have some level of scrutiny involved in it. And that's where you probably want to anonymize your data.
So how many so far at Southern,
That.
And the question, follow up on this gentleman's question is, are you seeing benefits or are you still in the planning phase,
So obviously I had to get this slide deck approved by our Corp Com. I will tell you that we have quite a few implemented, perhaps even some from that list. I can neither confirm nor deny that. But we have been, one of the first things that we did years ago is start out with a data strategy. If you don't have a data strategy, there's your baseline. A data strategy, understanding, how you're going to do your analytics and then stepping into it. I saw a great meme. If I can find it again one day, I'll share it. But it's a great meme. It has like steps, and then there's a little kid at the bottom of the steps, and they're trying to go from this step to this step. You know how as a kid you would see how many you could skip? But the meme has the kid doing that, but with the steps were data or like governance, analytics, and then AI was up here. So if you still have data, if you have data sitting in a, in PDF somewhere, then there's probably a different conversation as to how do I get to AI, but it's how do I, really start understanding what I can do with my data. Treat it as an asset. Your data is an asset. So anything else? Yes, sir.
Topic you mentioned, or you touched on synthetic data.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts there, and how do you see that?
So it's interesting. There's a lot, especially you're seeing a lot of synthetic data, especially in reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning, if you think about self-driving cars, that uses reinforcement learning. So people, obviously, if you're going to have it create data for you, then you're kind of leading, what type of data it's going to create. I haven't played with data creation in Gen AI specifically, but I've been reading about, some of the things. Because it is more of a creative mechanism, it's actually showing some levels of success. But the idea is that if you don't have enough data to truly train a model, it's really creating a whole bunch of other data and a whole bunch of scenarios that can help train that model. Yes.
So just to explain some of our applications around ETR, estimated time to recovery, applications around image management, specifically in utility spaces. This is event specific and it requires some occurrence to be able to capture that amount of data. So we got to kind of look at how we deploy synthetic data to be able to train the model for ETR, to be able to train the model for bench management. So as we go down the value stream, we really need to kind of figure out the integrity of that synthetic data. If our utility partners are going to get what they need in terms of ETR and bench management, they need some kind of occurrence-based data that's going to allow for that.
You don't want to apply synthetic data to every use case. And I can guarantee you that you have data for estimated restoration time, because I happen to know somebody who has a working ETR model, and you don't need synthetic data for it. You've got enough using your meter data, your outage data. And a very similar situation with veg management. What I recommend is starting with kind of a use case. I mean, you're not going to boil the ocean, but start with something that's going to, like one of the things that I've seen that has worked for people is with veg management. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to it. There's so many rules, and you've got to cut this, and it can't impede more than this, and it has to be done this every so often. But then you also have people like equipment. You have people that are coming in, and you might want to, if you have Sector A and Sector B, I don't know what you call it, but Sector A and Sector B, you might want to do them together because you've got to bring in some sort of massive equipment. You've got to pull in people. So it becomes an optimization type problem. So some of the things that I've seen work with that is to apply more optimization and statistics to it first, and have people become in tune with it and work with it, and then start applying some things to it. Like, for example, okay, my budget to do this is, I'm going to make it up, $10 million, which is probably really low, but it's $10 million. So the thing that you might want to do is you might want to say, okay, what can I do? Can I meet all of my, can I meet what's required of me for 8 million? So where it becomes more predictive is taking problems like that and applying maybe some what if type analysis and stuff to them. But you don't want to apply synthetic data to everything. Oh, apologies for that.
So
You have to hold it.
you got to hold. And so all of the predictability is now, from a capacity perspective, that utilities need to be able to expert testimony for when they're in front of the PSC, right? And then this whole issue of co-location of power with the creation of data centers. What models really exist there that will help our utility partners be able to have the data that they need for expert testimony when they're in front of the PSC, to be able to look at capacity from a substation perspective based on the number of data centers
Mm-hmm.
that are in their utility space, right?
Right.
And to some variance for co-location where they
Mhm.
generate their own power.
Right. So one of the things, I'm not sure you were here for the opener that Sasha was talking about. He said, who's doing data center planning and, kind of along that same line. I don't think you're seeing a lot of it yet. So to answer your question, are there models that exist? I'm not aware of any. There might be, but there is, I would think at this point, if there are, it's more academic. It's probably not the answer you wanted, but I think that's the reality of it at this point. Yes, sir.
As you meant, going in and out. Okay, as you mentioned, the explainability is important, and especially from a legal perspective or regulation perspective. How do you see adding in the whole concept of synthetic data into that mix? I mean, it's going to be hard enough explaining how a AI or learning algorithm works with real data, let alone explaining synthetically generated information.
That's why it's not applied to every use case. And so I will tell you where you see the most of it now is like in self-driving cars. So, the whole idea of reinforcement learning is that you're putting it in a whole bunch of different scenarios, kind of like if you've ever seen your little house robot, the little, sweeper, that mine stopped working. I'm really upset about that. But, it goes and it, does that. And it says, okay, I can't do this. I'm going to move it. So it uses this whole state and reward system. It's like, okay, if you're not hitting something, I'm going to give you a reward. And that's what gets it going in the right, direction. So I think whenever you have all of those types of things where you want to almost factorize every possible scenario, that's when you're going to have it. It's not, you don't want to use it for everything. But it's an excellent question, because even as you're coming into, there's all different types of methodologies and mechanisms. I mean, like that whenever you start doing, like if you do like a true kind of like maybe you do, you have a lot of people, their first thing is maybe a linear regression. Those you might be able to. Or you might be able to do some sort of tree model and you can show how it does the decision. Those typically don't have the accuracy of something whenever you start getting really deep. And it's when you start applying all those layers, or when you start removing dimensions. If you want to have a fun read, I love something called, like dimensionality reduction. And so it creates like all these vectors to represent your data. Good luck explaining that. But it's fun. Okay, so we're done.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.